This story is going to be a little different because I'm going to read it. I had written this story back when I was taking freshman comp in college, and I thought that you might enjoy it. And again, it's about my grandfather when he was about 12 years old. And that would have put it about 1896. Now, he and his little brother were playing in the gravel pit with some other boys. And when the guard discovered them, he fired a warning shot, which grazed Ed's lower lip, and he always had a mark there after that. And the guard sent for the sheriff, who trailed the boys to their house. Now, Ed and Harold hid in a house which the townspeople claimed was haunted. Since they had been raised to not believe in ghosts, they were not at all worried about people's superstitions. And so they sat contentedly munching on their sandwiches that their mother had prepared for them in the morning. But just as they finished those sandwiches, a low moan reverberated through the house. Even though they knew there were no such things as ghosts in that house, their hair prickled and their bodies became weak and clammy. Ed swallowed hard and whispered to Harold to follow him as he quietly began his search for the cause of the noise. They left the front room and tiptoed into the kitchen. They saw a chair with a broken leg, the remains of a wood-burning stove, and a door on the other side of the room. Looking at each other nervously, they crossed the kitchen floor and stood there a few moments, each daring the other to open the door. Finally, Ed, the oldest one, opened it. When they peered into the dark basement, the moaning stopped. They shut the door quickly and dashed from the room. A short time later, the moaning began again. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, the boys eased the basement door open and crept down the stairs. The moaning continued, but to their relief, it sounded farther away. When the boys' eyes adjusted to the semi-darkness, they saw dusty wooden crates, old fruit jars, and other odds and ends that the last tenants had left in their hurry to get out of the house. Whooping with glee, the boys forgot all about the search for the strange noise and began lugging the crates and other paraphernalia up the stairs and into the front room. They decided to set up housekeeping there for a few days until the sheriff would become busy with more important matters than boys that were playing in the gravel pit. It was getting dark, so they decided they'd go to sleep. Their stomachs growled, and they wished they had had a blanket, but they huddled together as best as they could and finally fell into a restless sleep. Once in the middle of the night, Harold cried out in terror as the noise sounded again. Shaking with fright, Ed wrapped his arms around his terrified brother and talked to him softly. He determined he would find the source of that noise that had been frightening so many people for so long. Early the next morning, a commotion outside awakened the boys. When they peeked out of the front window, they discovered a large crowd of curious people milling about behind the sheriff and the owner of the gravel pit. It soon became apparent to Ed that even the sheriff was too superstitious to go into that haunted house. Since the boys knew they had nothing to fear, they stood at the window and laughed at those standing outside. Although this enraged the sheriff and the gravel pit owner, they still kept their distance. At last they gave up, and the crowd melted away. The moaning was beginning again, so the boys decided to explore the only part of the house that they hadn't been in yet, the upstairs. As they climbed cautiously up the stairs, the sound became louder and louder. Even though Ed was sure no ghosts were in that house and making that eerie moaning, he couldn't help feeling nervous. He smiled as he noticed Harold trembling uncontrollably. Upstairs were 2 dingy bedrooms. They entered one dusty room and looked around. All they could see were the remains of a headless doll. The moaning was louder in the other room, however. It was completely empty, except for a few spiders which had claimed it as theirs. Ed was puzzled. Where could that noise be coming from? On an impulse, he stuck his head out of the gaping hole in the window and looked outside. Then he noticed a bottle caught in the eaves at the corner of the house. It was setting at such a strange angle that when the wind blew across the open end of the bottle, it sounded like a loud moan. Ed motioned for Harold to come and see the ghost. The boys rolled on the dusty floor and laughed so hard tears rolled down their faces because they had been terrified of a brown bottle. They decided to leave it there until they felt it was safe to sneak back home. Then they removed it. 55 years later, Ed, who was my grandfather, loved to tell me this story and to tell how several months later, when they went back to that town, they noticed a family had moved into the no longer haunted house. And the people in the town looked in awe at the 2 boys who had chased the ghosts away. I hope you enjoyed that story, and if you want to know more about why there's no ghosts, you can ask me.